The Baltimore Ravens pick up a dominant statement win over the Detroit Lions in Week 7, 38-6. We talk about everything that happened, plus some trade talk, and a lot more coming up next year on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. As always, thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We are free and available all podcasting platforms, so in video form on YouTube, anywhere you get your audio podcasts as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And that was fun. That was a fun little game we just watched there. The Ravens utterly destroy the Detroit Lions by the final score of 38-6. We had you covered here on this instant reaction edition of the show. You can comment if you're live here on YouTube with us in the comments. If you missed out, if you're listening to a replay of the video form or audio form, it's available either way. We are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, Monday through Friday. We actually had 3 former Baltimore Ravens wide receivers on the show last week. Kadri Ismail on Tuesday, Mark Clayton on Wednesday, and Anquan Bolden on Friday. So if you want to check out those episodes, highly recommend that as well. Comments are already popping here, and so we have some Todd Monken praise off the bat from left field, Jay saying Todd Monken absolutely dialed it up, and the D came to play. The team looks so focused, can tell they had a great week of practice. Even the post-game conference, you can tell how locked in Lamar is. We're going to be getting into all that and more today. We'll talk about the dominating win, get into some stats, some individual performances, a lot more, plus the offensive statement that they made here today against one of the best teams in the NFC. Obviously, they didn't look like that today, but we will talk about that as well. Then also we'll get into some trade talk. I know that's a big storyline, and the Ravens, after this win, could still add to that already dominating team, both offensively and defensively. So let's jump right in here. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. You can tell a friend, tell a family member that we are here doing Ravens content. Plus, you can subscribe over on Subtext for more exclusive content, one-on-one text conversations, and more. Let's get into this here, though. Yeah, Baltimore just absolutely balling out in this game. I mean, where do we start other than with Mr. Lamar Jackson himself? 21-27, 357 yards passing, 3 touchdowns for him, averaged 13.2 yards per attempt. I tried to look it up. I couldn't get the exact number on it, but I think this is a top 10 yards per attempt performance by Lamar. The best of his career was that 2019 Week 1 game against Miami. He averaged right around 16 yards per attempt in that game. He's had a couple of other 13-yard per attempt games, but this one he was dialed in for the entire course of the game and just looked really cool, calm, and collected. Something we've been saying for the entire really course of the season for him, but the offense hadn't put it together for a full 60 minutes yet. We had always talked about how, this was a first half game, but they couldn't get it together in the second half, or they started really slow, and then they put it together in the second half. This was 60 minutes of just domination. They were up 28-0 at half. They didn't necessarily have to put up another 28. They ended up only putting up 10 in the second half. But with Lamar, it was not just through the air. It was also on the ground in typical Lamar fashion. 9 for 36 and a touchdown on the ground for him, which, again, for what Lamar brings to the table, part of what makes him so dangerous is his ability to maneuver in the pocket. And what I mean by that is not just, he can take off and scramble. It's so much deeper than that, because over the course of this season, what I've noticed, and maybe, people here watching or listening, you've also noticed, but to me, it feels like he's escaping more, but with those escape attempts, he's not just boom, tuck it and run. He's surveying the entire field, waiting for guys to get open, and it results in a lot more explosive plays. And I think we saw that over the course of the game here today, where that one play where it's the Nelson Aguilar touchdown literally escapes the pocket, just kind of backpedals, looking. Aguilar gets open. And I know the broadcast made a big point of the fact that it was about 9 to 10 seconds of time Lamar had to throw. The offensive line, got to give them credit as well. Lamar had a lot of time to throw and a lot of ability for him to wait for his receivers to get open, which we saw multiple big Zay Flowers completions. Rashad Bateman had a couple of nice catches. But this is probably one of the weirder box scores you're going to see in terms of pass catching because, usually the box score goes in terms of yards. Well, Gus Edwards led the box score with 80 yards on one reception. Gus Edwards averaged 80 yards a catch on Sunday against the Lions. Obviously, it was just one catch on one target. It was a play that, again, Lamar Jackson, it looked like it was going to be a read option where Lamar was going to run to the left side, but a Lions defender read it well and had that gapped up. So Lamar takes it and sees Gus Edwards with literally no one in front of him and just dumps it off. And that was it. He didn't try to do too much, literally just took what was there. And that's exactly what it was. And that's what it has been for him for the entire course of the season, which to me is one of the more impressive things, some of the decision-making that we've seen from him over the course of this entire season. It's been not just, Lamar can take off and run and scramble because, yeah, he can do that. We know he can do that because he's so dynamic when he does it. But we've known that Lamar has this ability in him to throw the football and make something out of nothing, not just with his legs. His legs play a big part in it, but with his arm. And that has been, I think, this season, one of the more pleasant surprises is just to see him do it more often than not. I think this has been an evolution and a point that Todd Monken has tried to make in this offense led by Lamar Jackson. And that to me was a big part of today's game. Rushing the ball, Gus Edwards had 14 for 64 and a score. Justice Hill, 4 for 46. I mentioned Lamar. The Lions could not stop anything today. I mean, you look at the team stats, it was a bloodbath. It was terrible for the Lions. The Ravens averaged 9.1 yards per play compared to Detroit's 4.7. I mean, the Lions had this game was over in the second quarter. I mean, we can be honest about that, where they had to start going for it on fourth down and they weren't converting on the fourth downs. They had to go for it in the middle of the second quarter from midfield on like a 4th and 8 or something. In the middle of the second quarter. At that point, the game is over, right? Obviously, you got to play the full 60 minutes. You can't allow them to get back in the game. But the way the Ravens defense was dominating this entire game, this was a statement win and a barometer for both teams, both the Ravens and the Lions. If it had gone the other way, if the Ravens had maybe lost a close game or the Lions dominated them, we'd be talking about, all right, what should the Ravens do against some of these top teams in the league? The Ravens showed that when they're on all cylinders, when they're clicking, when they're healthy, they have it, and they are themselves one of the best teams in this league. Felix in the chat saying, what a game. We were balling. Passing game was on fire. Absolutely it was. I mean, for the way that the Ravens defense had kind of been dragging this offense across the finish line for most of these games, we saw it against the Colts in the game they lost, the Steelers in the game they lost, the Titans in the game that they won. There were those games where the defense was just kind of making up for Baltimore's mistakes. Not only were there no mistakes in it, I guess there was the fumble, but it didn't really matter enough to really be like this big mistake the defense had to really cover up for. This was a game that the offense proved that you can have so much involvement from your pass catchers. I mean, 9 different pass catchers caught a ball for the Ravens in this game. We had seen a lot of early in the season, Mark Andrews is going to have 10 targets, Zay Flowers is going to have 10 targets, and then not a lot of other guys are going to get involved. Well, I mentioned Gus Edwards, his 80-yard catch. Zay had 4 for 75 on 6 targets. Mark Andrews, 4 for 63 and 2 touchdowns on 6 targets. Odell, 5 catches on 7 targets. Rashad Bateman had 2 catches on 3 targets. Patrick Ricard even got involved with 2 catches on 2 targets, including he was rumbling on that 28-yarder. Nelson Aguilar had a touchdown. Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill getting involved. Lamar was spreading the ball out, and that was the vision the whole time. The whole time with this Ravens offense has been they have so many different weapons around Lamar's ability, not only as a thrower, but as a runner as well. Who are you going to guard? And who are you going to either leave in single coverage or take some attention off of on that? Well, I think it was the Zay pass early in the game, that long Zay pass. They essentially doubled Mark Andrews on that play. And Mark Andrews gets the attention. Zay Flowers gets the ability to run one-on-one with a guy. And we know with Zay's route running ability, that usually ends up in the favor of the Ravens. So this was a great game by Todd Monken. He was fired up about it. I think this was a long time coming, just that full, consistent 60-minute performance as well. And Matt saying biggest thing about today was that both sides played with equal intensity. We hear about complementary football, but rarely see it in Baltimore. It's usually one side carrying the other. Not today. Not today, Matt. You're exactly right about that. I think Baltimore did a great job of complementing the complementary football aspect of that, the offense with the defense and the defense with the offense. Defense was getting stops. Jared Goff looked terrible. I mean, and I will give Jared Goff credit. To this point, outside of today, he had been playing probably like a borderline top 10, top 12 quarterback. He looked like a bottom 5 quarterback today. Like he looked terrible. Decision-making was not there. The Ravens pass rush has been incredible all season. Justin Madubuike, another huge game. Kyle Van Noy has 2 sacks. The whole game defensively, the Lions could never catch a rhythm, and the Ravens offense was so good they couldn't afford to not catch a rhythm. It could have been that back and forth, like, oh, we're going to score, then we're going to score, then you're going to score, then you're going to score, but it never worked out that way because the Ravens put up 21 points in under 18 minutes, and the Lions couldn't get anything going early, and essentially that's where the game kind of got away from them. David saying, David Garcia's in the chat here, huge hype man. David's my man. Get him, Senor Kevin O. Great job and whatnot. All Ravens, big dog. Let him know what time it is. David, you're my man. I appreciate you being here. And we have a good comment from Evan that I want to get to in the second part of the show. So coming up in the second part here, we dive into what Evan had to say, and plus breaking down what this means for the offense, not just from this game, but moving forward, the confidence it gives this unit. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a lot to talk about on this instant reaction live edition of Locked On Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. First, though, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors, and our partners over at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer, bringing some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. So whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to be providing you the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny's picked out for us on eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And I know CJ Stroud was on a bye this week, but he's been one of the best pocket passers early this season, racking up fantasy points with his passing, even limiting damage as well. Through 6 games, he has only 1 interception to go with 9 touchdowns, and he's averaged under 277 passing yards per game. Plus, in Week 8, he draws a shaky Panthers pass. Defense has fallen apart in recent weeks after facing some bad quarterbacks early. The Panthers have a few answers for his key weapons in the coverage game, and Stroud will be confident to pick him apart for another strong fantasy passing performance. Again, Vinny Iyer of Locked On Fantasy Football is going to bring you the best fantasy advice and help you win a fantasy championship. eBay Motors knows the championship teams about each player being a perfect fit. That's the same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. They have brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your ride needs, eBay Motors has it. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We're back here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher talking to you after the Ravens make a statement. Made a huge statement against that really good Detroit Lions team, coming up with a 38-6 absolute dominant win over that team. And we're going to be talking still about the offense, but I want to get into a comment from Evan Rhodes here, who makes a good comment. Great win today. Players and coaches never took their foot off the gas and played until the final whistle. It didn't unravel after that fumble between Lamar and Justice. And that's the key point here, right? Because with that fumble, we've seen that movie before this season where the Ravens are doing well, they're gaining momentum, they're dominating, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong. There's an offensive mishap, a turnover happens, and then the Ravens can't get momentum back. The other team starts to feel it, and it becomes a closer game than it needs to be, or the Ravens lose a game they should have won if not for the mishap. There's that Justice Hill fumble. And look, it was 28-0 at that point. So it wasn't like it was 10-3 and that fumble could have turned the tides and make an easy comeback. It would have been a very tough comeback regardless. But the fact that the Ravens were able to figure out, oh, hey, look, you know what? We fumbled the ball. Bad mishap. It happens. But they didn't let it affect them and didn't let the Lions get back in that game. The defense tightened up, got to stop. And the offense ends up responding and doesn't end up getting into a funk. So the fumbling has been a problem, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Definitely has to improve as the season goes on, because if that does happen in a close game, you're maybe not feeling as great because we've seen that happen before. But I think it was a great win because we saw something happen after all this good, all this domination. Something bad happens to the Ravens offense, but it didn't let them, that didn't impact their ability to go out there and win the game. So that's been really key. Derek Jones saying, I wonder if the Ravens get to the Super Bowl again, will they shut the lights off again whenever we have a defense this stout with a complimentary offense? It's scary. I talked to Anquan about that, Anquan Bolden about that on Friday. He gave his insight on what he thought about that. So a shameless plug to go check out Friday's show with Anquan and the interview I did with him. But yeah, it is the complimentary offense side of things, plus the defense in there too. The big concern for a lot of people is the defense has been playing incredible all season. It's the offense that is needed to catch up. And, we hadn't seen that. We'd seen them play really well for like a half and then not really do anything else for the rest of the game. It wasn't the case in this one, though. The Ravens offense set the tone early. And you know what the big part of that was? It was a surprising part of it where John Harbaugh takes the ball to start the game. The Ravens won the toss, and he elected to receive, which in today's game, usually you defer. You want to get the ball to your offense in the second half. Your defense can start strong. It's advantageous to have you get the ball in the second half. But the Ravens, I think, got confidence from John Harbaugh trusting them and saying, you know what, if we get this ball, we're going to go down there and score, and then we're going to do it again and again and again. And that's exactly what happened. So this was jump-started because who knows what happens if the Lions get the ball first and they go down the field, they get an early 3 or an early 7. Is the Ravens offense going to respond the way that they did to start the game if they didn't get the ball first? It's a fair question. I'm not saying it would have because the Ravens defense played so well. But that was an interesting point to me that I saw that I think is really interesting in the grand scheme of things, because usually you defer when you win the coin toss, but John Harbaugh elected to receive there. Garrison saying vintage Jackson 2019. Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying the 2019 Ravens had arrived to M&T Bank Stadium on Sunday. It looked like that, right? Domination all the way through, but it looked a little different because it wasn't really the run game that was dominating the majority of the game. It was the passing game. And obviously the run game did their thing. I mean, the Ravens averaged 5.4 yards per carry. They were really good on the ground. But it was Lamar Jackson dicing up this Detroit defense. And again, I want to say this was a top 10 unit. This is the second time in less than a month that the Ravens have diced up a top 10 defensive unit. Cleveland comes in. You remember that Cleveland game? It was the Browns are the number one defense. The Browns have the best defense in the league. Myles Garrett, all this stuff. And Lamar comes in and just dominates them. Myles Garrett had a good game, but Lamar diced up that defense. This Detroit team, if you remember, if you watched our shows throughout the week, I made a huge point about it. Detroit was the second best rush defense in the NFL coming into this game. They were the sixth best passing defense coming into this game in the league. Baltimore diced it up both. I mean, we're going to see those stats drop. I mean, I'll probably put it out on Twitter tomorrow when, or probably Tuesday, actually, when all the games are over. But this is the second time Lamar Jackson has diced up a top 10 unit that has gotten a lot of praise from, national media. I mean, I gave them their praise because they deserve it. But I think that a lot of people were discounting Lamar because that Cleveland defense, they're one heck of a unit. Baltimore dismantled them. That Detroit defense, one heck of a unit. Baltimore dismantled them as well. And then Molly saying we need Keaton Mitchell in the game. The Ravens had a couple of cool designs. Todd Monken, he opened up the vault a little bit in this game, didn't he? I think was it the first play of the game? Maybe it was the third. I can't remember. But that first drive, Odell, that play where it was an option, Lamar takes it, looks like he's going to just run it, but then he ends up throwing it to Odell for a huge gain. That was a really cool play design. And then later in the game, I think it was another option player. Maybe it was a handoff with two guys going in motion to the left side of the field. And Lamar kind of does a spin flip to Keaton Mitchell, who cuts up field. I think it was a 9-yard gain. Keaton Mitchell is fast and electric now. I think he actually left the game with an injury. So I didn't see anything from John Harbaugh about his status. Maybe I just missed it. But at the end of the day, the Ravens made a statement in this game when I think some people doubted their full game ability, their full game performance. Because look, we can admit that the Ravens hadn't really played a top offense until this game, but the Lions hadn't really played a good defense until this one. And Roquan Smith made a really big point about, you know what, I'm a show me guy. You got to show me that you're worthy of my respect. And the Lions did nothing like that. Amon-Ra St. Brown was getting suplexed late in the game by Rock Ya-Sin. It was just an overall pretty embarrassing day for the Lions and a great day for the Ravens. They've solidified themselves as a team that if they can continue with what they were doing in this game, if they can continue this momentum, because we've talked about it all season where we didn't want to make this Ravens team go and get into a win-loss pattern, much like we saw them do last season. This is their second straight win. It's not a big win streak, but it is a win streak. Are they going to be able to go to Arizona, then come home to play Seattle? That's a big stretch of NFC games where if you drop a game here or there, you start to question a couple of things. But the Ravens did exactly what they were supposed to do against this Detroit team, which was if you wanted to make a statement, you didn't just have to play good defense. Your offense had to find a way to will out some points. and dominate both through the air and on the ground. And Lamar Jackson, there were a few throws that maybe got away from him in the wind a little bit and weren't really going his way. But as a whole, Lamar Jackson, I think, summarized the best himself, saying, look, this is just one regular season game, but the sky is the limit for this unit. And I don't think anybody expected, even myself included, this offense to go out there, as I've said time and time again, and score, 60 points a game and put up 400 total yards every single game. It was always going to be an adjustment to get to this point. But now that you're at this point, is every game going to be 38-6? Is every game going to be as dominant as this? Probably not. But you want to take this momentum as an offense and not take your foot off the gas even though the game is over. Take it through the end of the month. Take it through the end of the season. Then start to go in the playoffs. If this Ravens team starts to hit their stride starting now, if this was the start of that, a consistent offensive effort for consistent 60-minute stretches throughout games, that to me is going to be one of the biggest parts of the Ravens season. And this game could be a season-defining one, 1,000% for the Ravens here. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll continue talking about this game, get into chat, and also some trade talk, because you know what? The Ravens, they're 5-2. They dominated on both offense and defense, but they could still potentially add to this team. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll still have lots to dive into on this live instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, though, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And you can snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. There's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better place and time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, too. There's a wide range of betting options that include spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. And if you bet Lamar Jackson over, if you bet Ravens overs in this game, you're probably living pretty over on FanDuel. Maybe Lions unders, right? Maybe bet some Lions unders. Jahmyr Gibbs had a great game, to be fair, for Detroit. But I know if you bet Lamar Jackson overs, you're living a good life over on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off this NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens live, coming at you after the Ravens statement win. It's a big one, 38-6 over Detroit. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here. Again, you can subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us anywhere you get your audio podcasts as well. And we're 5 days a week, and obviously more during the season. We do these live shows after every single Ravens game, so turn notifications on YouTube. And if you miss them, again, you can watch them replay-wise, both on YouTube and in audio form. They'll be out after the game. And we have a bunch of amazing content coming here for you. This is my Friday was my 1,100th episode, exclusive interview with Anquan Bolden. That was cool. Been doing this since 2019, and it looked like those 2019 Ravens showed up at M&T Bank Stadium. So I appreciate all the support for sure here on this show. But let's continue talking about this Ravens team. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. We haven't really talked about them a lot today, but they did their part. Roquan Smith leads this team, plus Arthur Millette, both those guys, 8 tackles apiece. Kyle Hamilton had 7, Patrick Queen 5, Kyle Van Noy 5. This Ravens defense has been balling out all season, but it's not just because of their stars. Obviously, Roquan's played great. Kyle Hamilton's played great. Patrick Queen, Marlon Humphrey coming back. It's some of these unsung guys like Arthur Millette, Jadeveon Clowney, Kyle Van Noy, Geno Stone. These players all making such a huge impact for either late-round picks or guys that were essentially signed off the bargain bin, the scrap heap, right? Not one person, I think, expected Jadeveon Clowney to come in and have the huge impact right off the bat they did. I was higher on the Clowney signing than other people, but the way that he started the season has been incredible. Kyle Van Noy, I had no idea he'd be this good so quickly for the Ravens. They have a lot of decisions to make this offseason. Justin Madubuike is going to make a lot of money. Geno Stone is going to make a lot of money. Patrick Queen is going to make a lot of money. They have to figure out what to do with Clowney and Van Noy and Michael Pierce, etc. But this defense right now is balling out as a whole, and we saw that against, again, a Lions offense with Jared Goff, who's been playing really well this season, Jahmyr Gibbs, who just came back and is explosive. They didn't have David Montgomery, so that was a loss for him, but Amon-Ra St. Brown had 13 catches for 102 yards, 7.8 yards per catch. You'll take that against Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had 19 targets in this game, which is a crazy amount of targets, by the way. But Jay Stepp saying play calling was next level. Monken called the best game this year. This was his best game by far. I completely agree with that statement. He was absolutely dicing up this Lions defense. And the Lions, essentially the running backs were untouched on a lot of plays. Lamar was making dominant throws, but the feel for the game that Todd Monken had, we've had a lot of conversations on this show about Todd Monken and some of the situational awareness that hasn't really been there for a full consistent 60 minutes. Throw him when he should have been running in the red zone, running when he should have been throwing in the red zone. Well, I would like to give Todd Monken some credit and this Ravens offense some credit when it comes to red zone. 5 for 6 in the red zone in this game. That's more than double the amount that the Ravens had conversion-wise over the past 2 weeks. They got back to business after being the top red zone offense in the league the first 4 weeks. They showed that, especially in this game against Detroit here. Eugene saying 5-2 Ravens, the Cardinals next week. Look, they should be 6-2 after next week, right? They should be. Can't give it to them. Cardinals, again, have been, I'm not even checking. I'll look at the score right now. But the Cardinals have been, I guess, more competitive than a lot of people expected them to be. But the Ravens should win that game. Now, if they don't, we're going to be having conversations, but they should continue momentum in that game against a team that is probably not going to make the playoffs this year, and that should be a 6-2 football team. Evan saying Rock Ya-Sin signing is becoming a little confusing. He barely plays. Is that solely because Brandon Stevens is a better cornerback? Yeah, I think it's probably a little of Brandon Stevens playing so well, Evan, and then also maybe he just hasn't looked good in practice. For a lot of these, it's sports, right? Football, basketball, baseball, whatever, hockey. A lot of it comes down to you earn playing time in practice if you're kind of fighting for fringe time. And maybe Ya-Sin just hasn't looked good in practice. I know that's more of a training camp thing, but it still happens throughout the season where maybe he just hasn't looked good in practice, is having some trouble picking up the playbook. But that, yeah, I mean, he was pretty much being lauded as Baltimore's second corner the entire offseason. Brandon Stevens was going to play safety, but then injuries kind of forced Brandon Stevens back into corner. And then, the rest is history there. Stevens has been incredible for him. Gut saying, I enjoy close games, but I'll still take blowouts every Sunday. I think that Ravens fans deserved. I think everybody watching that game, every Ravens fan deserved just to sit back, relax, and watch. It's been a very stressful season, a lot of close games, and we shouldn't have been very close. I'm sure every Ravens fan enjoyed just being, you know what, I'm going to kick back and relax and just watch the Ravens dominate a little bit. So that was, I think, a very nice surprise and a pleasant one for a lot of people. But again, this is a 5-2 football team. They dominate one of the best teams in the NFC, but they might not be done adding to their roster. The trade deadline coming up next Tuesday. It's Halloween, October 31st. I'm considering wearing a Halloween costume. You know what? If I get enough people saying I should, I'll do it. But regardless, that's going to be a big day for the Ravens because they could still add. And we'll do a little bit of trade talk before rounding out the Lions game. There have been a lot of people saying they should trade for a wide receiver, maybe a running back, edge, corner, right? Offensive line. There have been a lot of positions we've talked about. We'll also continue to talk about it on the show throughout the course of the remainder of the week. But at this point, after a game like this, it's really hard to say, oh, well, they need to add this or that because every unit dominated. Like every unit was incredible. So at this point, if I had to pick one, and it depends who's out there, I know a lot of people will still say edge. My concern level for edge has kind of gone down over the past few weeks just because you have Clowney who's playing so well. You have Denoy. Owe is back now. Hopefully Bowser and Ajabo can come back at some point soon. I understand if maybe the timelines are a bit longer on Bowser and Ajabo, you might want to bring in somebody. But I think corner to me, just to solidify that secondary, whether it's a big splash like a Pat Surtain, which I know Denver has said they're not moving him, but I will believe that when the clock strikes 4 on October 31st. Maybe it's a more realistic option like a Rasul Douglas, a Dante Jackson, for example. I think if you can add a solid 3-corner rotation with Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens plus a trade deadline acquisition, it brings it back to the Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Carr, and Jimmy Smith days. Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, and Jimmy Smith. Plus you have Arthur Millette, who's playing really well in the slot, and a couple other guys as depth pieces like Arnold Darby and Rock Ya-Sin, et cetera. So that to me is kind of where I would go with where I would trade for a position if I were the Ravens. I understand the edge conversation. I feel like Baltimore is confident in their wide receivers. I wouldn't expect them to trade for a Jerry Jeudy or anybody. I just don't know where he'd play. Like, I think Baltimore's still confident in Bateman. Beckham obviously had a much better game compared to what he's done. I mean, I don't know where a Jerry Jeudy would play, right? Like, I just don't see it. Running back, I could understand it, but it doesn't look like Barkley's going to be moved. Doesn't look like Derrick Henry's going to be moved. I mean, maybe Zach Moss, right? I don't know. I feel like maybe if they want to add a third running back to that picture, with JK being out, they could. But after a game like this, with the opportunity still to add and maybe shore up a hole or two, if this is what you get most weeks, I'm not saying, again, every game's going to be 38-6, but if this is what you get most weeks from this offense, way the defense is playing, I mean, this is a very scary team, one of the best in the AFC, one of the best in the NFL. That was a statement they made today, which, Buffalo loses a game to the Patriots, who have looked awful. The Bills are a weird team. I personally am not a huge fan of the Bills in terms of what they've done over the past couple of seasons. Feels like they should have been a lot more dominant than they are. I still think Kansas City's really good. I think Cincinnati's going to probably, I don't know what's going to happen to them after their bye, but they're a team to watch. There are a bunch of other good teams too. Miami is really, really good. So you got to kind of watch out for all those teams. But Baltimore, I think, established themselves as one of the best teams in the AFC in this game. And we had kind of seen those flashes. It wasn't like we didn't know that they had this potential. They just had not been showing it. So it's going to be important for them to kind of figure it out and keep the wave, keep riding the wave of the momentum here for sure. Barry saying, we played so well, the fumble didn't hurt us. How good are we going to be? I'm going to get rid of the hiccups. I mean, exactly, right? It was 28-0. The fumble happens. But as I talked about earlier in the show, I think it was really impressive how, again, they responded to that. And they didn't 28-0. I think the game was over in the first place, right? But at this point, I don't really know what else they could have done well in that game. I mean, the fumble was the one big mishap, but they did almost everything right in that game. It was a dominant wire-to-wire, one of the most dominant performances of the Lamar Jackson era, to be completely honest. Stefan's saying, we dominated one of the best offensive lines in football. If this isn't a statement for our defense, I don't know what is. Also, Matt McDonald is probably gone after the season, most definitely next season. Yeah, Stefan, that's a good point. I don't like saying it because it gets people mad, but I'm not sure Matt McDonald is here after the season. I don't think he is. And that's not me wanting him to be gone, right? I just think he's been so good that teams are going to call about him. And, you could say, oh, well, what about Don Martindale? He got interviews, but he never got it. I think this is different. McDonald is one of the most up-and-coming coaches in the league. There aren't very many holes in his defense. But with Don Martindale, you knew it was he was live by the blitz, die by the blitz, right? You knew that about him. And I think with McDonald, his players love him. Not that the Ravens didn't love Martindale. He was a player's guy for sure. But McDonald, to me, that one will be a tough one if he does leave. But I don't know. I agree with you, Stefan, where I don't think if it's not this offseason, it will probably be next, the way he's coaching. Gut saying, where do the Ravens stand as far as fumbles? I'll have to check that probably after Monday because the stats haven't been updated yet. But it was one fumble in this game. Still towards the bottom, I think, in total fumbles. But again, at the end of the day, that has to get shored up because if that fumble happened at 10-3, it would be a little different conversation we'd be having if Detroit were able to come back. Dr. Detroit in the chat saying, nice game, folks. I appreciate you being in here, Dr. Detroit. I know it's tough after a game like that. Lions are still going to run away with that North Division. I mean, you got to give them credit, right? We talked about the Lions all week. They're a really good football team. Just wasn't their day, right? It wasn't the Lions' day. But I still have a lot of respect for them as a football team. I'm still really impressed with the way that they built their roster. They've been dealing with a lot of injuries too, just like the Ravens. So Detroit's a team that, again, Baltimore's kind of had their number over the past couple of seasons, but I still think they're going to run away with that North Division. Stefan saying, if we do make a trade, the only possibility is defensive line rotation with depth so we don't have to blitz all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think that I saw more pressure with 4 today. Justin Madubuike was dominating off the snap. He's been incredible all year. They were running some stunts and some inside-out stuff, which was really interesting too. I saw more pressure from 4, which was really encouraging considering we've been talking for multiple seasons about how they can't generate consistent pressure with 4. I saw it decently consistently in this game, which I was very impressed with and honestly very, very proud of. And Gut saying the offensive line looked good. I agree, Gut, 100%. I mean, the way that Lamar was able to operate in that pocket doesn't happen. Yeah, Radical saying O-line was amazing today. Lamar doesn't operate in the pocket, him just standing there for 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds. If the offensive line isn't blocking like that, Lamar can escape and do his thing and keep looking, surveying, etc. But he was clean most of his game. I don't think Detroit had a sack, did they? Maybe they had one. I'm checking the box score quickly. Detroit, no sacks for this Ravens offensive line given up. So, yeah, they were incredible. I get a lot of credit. There was that viral clip of Ronnie Stanley that I and so many others put out on Twitter of him bulldozing a Lions defensive back on that touchdown early in the game. Huge shout out to the Ravens offensive line because without them, I still think the Ravens win the game, right? But it all starts up front, both for an offense and for a defense. And I think this was probably one of Baltimore's best offensive line games, if not the best offensive line game of the Ravens 2023 season. That's all I have for you here today on Locked on Ravens. I appreciate you tuning into this live edition of the show. We'll be back here at 6 a.m. tomorrow, of course, talking more Ravens football, offensive dominant performance. Plus, if Lamar Jackson is in the MVP conversation, so be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form, subscribe on subtext for more Ravens content. Be sure to stay tuned for everything. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked on Ravens.